Hi, it's Dr. Lori. I want to tell you today a little bit about buying and selling perfume bottles, makeup accessories, those types of objects. I talk a lot about bottles, but I want to focus on perfume bottles. A lot of people are making a lot of money online by reselling, buying at estate sales at thrift stores and such, and reselling perfume bottles and the perfume that's in them. So first thing you have to do, as with any category of collectibles, you've got to know about the category. So I want to give you a little bit of information, a little bit of background about perfumes in general, okay? Before we start talking about shapes and sizes, types and designers, scents and such. First of all, perfumes. You have to identify whether or not you have an old scent, right? An old perfume. So I want you to look at your perfume, whatever it might be, look at the bottle. Maybe you picked something up at an estate sale, or maybe you picked it up at the thrift store. And basically, I want you to look at it, and I want you to basically open it up, and I want you to take a sniff, right? Don't, inhale like, you're smelling pizza, right? Just take a little sniff of it and see if the scent seems fresh, seems new. Look at the actual bottle and look at how much actual liquid perfume is in the bottle, okay? This is true of makeup too when you're talking about makeup. So look and see how much has evaporated. That will tell you about time period, how long it's been sitting and sitting and sitting. Also look and try to identify whether or not the liquid is opaque, see-through or not, okay? Is it dark in color? I remember that to be a lighter colored perfume. So this liquid shouldn't be opaque, shouldn't be dark in color, should not have a strong scent, should not have a vinegar smell, and should not be evaporated. Okay, that's the start. The other thing that you're going to read a lot online from all these experts is this information about whether the perfume, in fact, the notes or the base of the perfume will actually deteriorate over time. Okay, so what happens is citrus and floral scents tend to go away. They're more volatile. They tend to go away faster, right? The Woodsy Scents, the Sandalwood, the kind of woodsy kinds of scents, balsamic types of scents seem to stay longer, so they have a longer shelf life. Most perfumiers or most perfumers are actually going to tell you, 18 months to 2 years, you need new perfume, right? Or they're going to tell you that you need it more and more often, right? Remember, never keep perfume in direct sunlight, in a place where there's heat, where temperature and humidity changes. The bathroom's actually the worst place for perfumes. And this talks about the history of how we actually use things. So like perfumes and perfume bottles were usually on dressers in the early part of the 20th century. They weren't stored in a linen closet, in a bathroom closet, in a drawer. And by the 1970s or 80s, we see a lot of us who are storing this stuff in bathrooms, not the best place. You should never shake a perfume. People will shake perfume. You're not supposed to do that either. So remember, you're looking for the original scents and such. So knowing a little bit about perfume is relatively important. And here's another important point. You see this bottle? This bottle dates from the 1940s, 1950s. And this particular bottle is a pressed glass bottle with some details on it. It's very pretty. Of course, it's for perfume. And you can see, of course, the stopper here is decorated too. Okay, well, in the old days, they would basically move the perfume from one particular bottle to a bottle like this that would always stay on a dresser. We don't do that, and it's actually suggested that you don't move a perfume or pour a perfume into a different bottle. Keep it in its original bottle. That sparks the trend for designer collectible perfume bottles, because these types of bottles, early 20th century bottles like these, fall out of favor once, again, the designers and the manufacturers start to say, hey, wait a minute, you don't want to put the perfume in a different bottle, you want to keep the perfume in the bottle that we sold it to you in. Okay? This is when we start to have gorgeous bottles made of gilt over gold, enameled bottles, bottles with brass metal overlay, bottles with atomizers, fantastic bottles. And this, of course, they become collectible. So I want to talk to you about some of the trends from about the 1950s to about the 1990s with respect to perfume bottles. And I've got some examples for you. Some of the things that I want you to think about now that you know how to identify vintage perfume from not vintage perfume or contemporary perfume is to talk about, again, not only press molded bottles. This bottle's probably worth about $75. It's pretty run-of-the-mill for a perfume bottle per se. And I want to talk to you about other elements that relate to perfume, like Talcum powder, right? Powders, face powders, and those jars that you would hold face powders. Even aftershave, of course, on the men's side would be important and come in collectible bottles like this one from Avon. I talk about Avon bottles a lot, actually. So this particular example, I want to start right here with Evening in Paris. And this is not perfume. This is a cobalt blue glass bottle. And this particular blue glass bottle from the 1940s into the 50s is a shaped bottle. So the bottles come in a different shape. That's one of the things that people are looking for with respect to collectability. Screw caps, where the cap actually unscrews on a bottle, is also important, and that's an innovation in the 1950s too. The color of the glass is always very important. You can have all different colored glass on your vanity table and it looks very pretty. Lots of people collected that way. Shape as well. Look at this particular form. This is ambush. Ambush, which is introduced in 1955 in this lovely pink bottle. Some people will call this an I Dream of Jeannie bottle, but I Dream of Jeannie actually is a little bit later. And what you're looking at here is what's important is actually this portion right here, this part of the atomizer, the spray here, the red spray top. Also notice that it looks like it's actually a belt around the middle of this figural form of the bottle. That too is important. So notice that you have labels that are in shapes, sizes, forms. So that's important. You see it here on the Evening in Paris, and you also see it here on Ambush. Ambush has a metal top too, and it also has, in fact, what's now starting to deteriorate, that specific label. The actual bottle looks like a figure, looks like a person, so they're identifying the middle with a label. It's later that they stop using labels and they start to just put the name of the perfume on, of course, the front of the bottle, so they don't have to deal with the issue of getting a label onto a glass bottle. This shows the innovations over time and the changes over time. So if you see a piece like this, you can say, hey, you know what? Dr. Lori taught me that if it has its name or its maker right on the actual glass bottle, it probably isn't from the 1950s or 60s. Maybe it's a reproduction of it, right? When they reproduce particular perfumes, which they do with a lot of perfumes. So this particular next piece is really indicative of what's happening in America in the 1960s. This is called Bon Voyage. And Bon Voyage was a very, very popular early 1960s, specifically 1961 for this bottle by Dana. It was, of course, imported from France. And you can see the label is somewhat deteriorated. Condition is going to be very important, not only for the bottles, but also for the labels and the tops and the spray element too, atomizers and such. If you're missing a label, that's going to be important. If you're missing a top, that's going to be important for value. So you want to make sure that you're careful about that. Look for different shapes, look for different spray tops, look for atomizers when you can. So, Bon Voyage has a lot of things happening. First of all, it's the time when travel was sparked. In the 1960s, it's the exoticism movement that's happening in the decorative arts or how we're furnishing our houses. And it's also happening with respect to perfume. It's the perfume for those of us who are going to take a trip. You know, the idea that you have Frank Sinatra in Cuba or Elizabeth Taylor is going home with Richard Burton to England, this kind of stuff. So you see a lot of travel influences. So of course, Bon Voyage is the name for this particular perfume. What also is important about perfumes that I want you to learn, you know, there's so much good information that you can find, is something called a batch code. The batch code is shown right here, and it will tell you that number can be applied to tell you, in fact, where and when a particular perfume was made. This becomes extremely important so you know whether or not the perfume is old or aging as it sits on the shelf, and it also will tell you where it was actually made. So batch codes can give you a lot of information about your particular perfume. The other thing that's amazing about this particular bottle is the fact that the bottle is full. All right, all of the vintage perfume is still in this bottle, right? Maybe it's evaporated a little bit, but very, very slight. It seems to be full. Full bottles are highly sought after. So the Ambush bottle here is worth about $70. Of course, as I said, the empty bottle here that you would put pieces in from the 1940s, 1950s worth about $75, and the Evening in Paris is worth about $60. All retail values based on a sales record where similar pieces have sold. Now, I've seen both of these bottles online, and people are saying I want $250 for each bottle. Well, they're not selling for that. So you have to know what they're selling for, what that particular price is, what that particular appraised value is, excuse me. So that's what you have with this. This particular piece, a full bottle of Bon Voyage will sell for about $50. Here's where the interesting part is. There's lots of people who are reformulating vintage scents with new scents. And what they're doing is they're taking a bottle like this, they're paying a lot for it, and they're reselling the actual scent in vials. Small, tiny vials that they are then selling for almost the same amount of money as the whole bottle will sell for online. So they're pouring it out into vials and they're selling individual vials and they're marketing it like, oh, smell like your Aunt Susie did when she went to her junior prom in 1960. This kind of thing. Or, make sure you remember mom's scent now that she's passed. This kind of thing. So you'll see a lot of that. As we move from the 1940s, 50s, 60s into the 70s, you see that people are realizing, manufacturers are realizing that, we can make a lot of money on perfume if we give them people who are buying it a collectible bottle. This is, of course, not a perfume bottle. It's an aftershave bottle, and it's by Avon. It is the United States Capitol building, and it has even the image, the gold image here of freedom on the top. And you can see, of course, the steps and the nice neoclassical architectural design typical for men. In an election year, this particular piece will go up because it relates to, of course, the government and the election time. So think about that when you're trying to market these pieces as well, if you are a seller per se. So this particular Avon aftershave bottle, while not a perfume bottle per se, this particular one in an election year will sell for about $35. Some Avon bottles, typical Avon bottles, which are all different shapes and sizes, there are images of birds and flowers, and sometimes you'll have images of cars and all different types of things. You will see them on the range anywhere between, of course, $10 for one and all the way up to $100, depending on whether or not it has the original scent, perfume, or aftershave in it from the 1970s. If you have the original boxes for any of these perfumes, it will increase in value about 10% as well. And then we move on into a fragrance that was introduced in 1948 but came of age in the 1980s. So this particular piece is called Nina Ricci's L'air de Temps, or the spirit of time, or the air of time. This particular piece has a sandalwood smell, right? A nice sandalwood scent. And when you take off the top, you can see the large nature of the actual spray. Now, what's interesting about these sprays is, well, you say, gee, it doesn't have any scent. A lot of these vintage perfumes still have a pretty strong scent. So this particular one shows you this enlarged spray top, and that's one of the keys to recognizing a perfume bottle that's from any time after 1975. You start to see these larger, of course, perfume sprays. What does that do? It sprays more perfume when you spray it, so you're using more in every spray, so you're going to have to buy more as time goes on, right? You're going to be buying it more often because you're going to be spraying so much with one spray. This is Nina Ricci. It's very desirable. It's almost full, and even in this condition, not completely full, it's $150 for this particular bottle. That's a lot for a bottle that you can get at the thrift store or a yard sale or a flea market or an estate sale. That's where they usually are, at estate sales, for only a couple of bucks. This next piece is Ralph Lauren introduces this in the late 1970s, 1978, 1984. This is Lauren for, of course, women. It goes along with the very famous 1978 to 1984 Polo perfume for men. And it was that idea that fashion and, of course, makeup and, of course, couture should be about a lifestyle, not only about a particular brand. And this is something that Ralph Lauren has actually maintained throughout a very long career, almost 40 years, of course, of introducing this particular scent. This particular scent had staying power. Why? It had staying power because it has sandalwood and those base notes that don't deteriorate over time. A large spray bottle and a cap that actually is very similar to the cap for Polo. And Polo, of course, the men's fragrance in that green bottle with the Polo player. That was the famous emblem, of course, of Ralph Lauren. This particular bottle from the 1980s is worth just about $65 with some perfume in it, right? About half the bottle full. The next piece is Blue, and Blue is a very, very popular but discontinued scent also by Ralph Lauren, and a lot of people look for it, and it was discontinued in the early 2000s, but this particular blue bottle kind of goes back to this idea here of Evening in Paris to make the bottle a particular color. The idea of blue and sort of equating it to the America's Cup and sailing and this kind of lifestyle is something that Ralph Lauren oftentimes maintained. I will share with you the scent that I have worn literally for more than 25 years, and it's Calvin Klein's Escape. That's why there's 3 bottles here and they're all empty. So this is what I've worn a long, long time. It is introduced in 1991, and it is, of course, Calvin Klein's Sandalwood scent. I don't like smells. I'm the person who goes into, a department store and they're all ready to spray you with something, and I'm like, don't come near me. I'm that person. I don't like smells. So I really prefer to have a very, very clean scent personally, and I don't mean to get personal, but so I always kept these bottles. I have a lot of these bottles. I have no idea why I kept these bottles. I just always did. So I kept the small ones, which I would oftentimes have in my purse as far back as of course, the 1990s, when I was still in graduate school, and also these other smaller bottles of the perfume. It was going to be discontinued, and I was one of the people who wrote in and said, oh my gosh, don't discontinue it. What will I do? That kind of thing, because it really is the only scent. This particular scent has a similar thing to some of the other ones. Again, a big spray. You use a lot of it. You go through it quickly. It's relatively inexpensive. The smalls are usually about $20, the large about $50. People will say, oh, Dr. Lori, I would think that you were wearing Chanel No. 5 or Chanel No. 19. I wear those too, but Escape is what I really like to wear and have worn a long time. Enough about me. When you're looking at the bottle is actually shaped. You have these nice striations all the way around. Batch mark is on a label on the back, and you only see, of course, the name on the top. So if you didn't have the top, if you've lost the top of this particular perfume over time, you actually will have lost what the name is. So you have to do some research. You can research by bottles as well, shapes of the bottles. You can actually research that way as well, but it's always easier if you have the batch number. I showed you what the batch number was. And also if you have, of course, the whole pieces. If you have the box too, that is always very good. The last one I want to talk to you about is also a circa 1991 introduction from Givenchy. And this is Amouage. And Amouage is very, very popular. A full bottle like this, it has a smaller spray. You can see if you compare it here to this one by Calvin Klein, or if you compare the spray bottle here to this one, which is quite large, by Ralph Lauren, or the Nina Ricci, which is really big. Amouage is quite small comparatively, and this one, of course, by Givenchy, this one is from 1991. Now, what you're going to see about this, if you're missing the top, as this one is, that top is missing. If you're missing that, you're going to decrease value about 25%. So if you can get the top or you can find the top, that's going to be important. You will see a lot of resellers from abroad, from Romania, from Russia, from different places where perfume retail is very, very hot. They have a lot of different perfumes in their culture and they like to change it out. When I was in Russia recently, I was surprised by how many perfumes that the young girls would wear. They'd wear all different scents for all different reasons. And lots of people do that. They have an everyday perfume, they have an evening perfume, they have a special occasion perfume, that kind of thing. But they had a lot, and a lot of the online sales come from places like Romania, Transylvania, that part of Romania, as well as, of course, places like Russia. So, getting back to Amouage, Amouage has a shaped or formed bottle, and it's easy to hold in your hand. It's comfortable. This all becomes very important, and again, it's introduced in the 70s and 80s. This particular bottle, only half full, is worth $175. A full bottle of Amouage, which is only from 1991. It's not that old. Far exceeds the value of a 1960s type perfume. So remember, quality of the perfume, the collectible bottle, and the designer will impact value. This one really is quite fine. My point in this primer on perfume bottles and perfume collecting is Know the history of whatever topic you are trying to undertake. So if you're thinking, I want to collect and I want to resell or buy, start a collection or resell perfume bottles, you need to know a little bit about the history of the topic, perfumes, perfume bottles, glass manufacturers, and such. They work together with people like Lalique and other great glass manufacturers. Even Baccarat made, of course, perfume bottles, so you've got to know about those. And Lalique perfume bottles were gorgeous. They had flowers, for example, their perfume bottles, and so were others from the 1920s, like those gilt perfume bottles with enamel, too. So think about the manufacturers of perfume bottles, glass makers mainly, and also think about what the goal is for many of these perfume makers, whether it's a designer like Ralph Lauren or Calvin Klein, or of course Coty or Dana, who are making these earlier pieces from the middle part of the 1900s. If you have any other questions, you know you can always ask them here. I'm Dr. Lori, and that's our primer on collectible perfume bottles and makeup accessories. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.